grant writing is one of those things where it's a lot of introspection and assessment of whether or not you are actually ready to apply for grant funding. A lot of folks believe that grant funding is like you send out a bunch of applications and all of a sudden at Christmas time, Santa comes and drops 100K into your bank account. It is very much not like that. It is a very important process that involves a lot of assessments on your own programming, what expenses you have that could be grant fundable, and aligning your mission and your programs with the funders who are looking to fund organizations that might be you. So today we're going to be talking about grant writing, and it's going to be a general introduction to proposal development. We only have an hour here, so the goal is to give you a primer so that moving forward, you know where to go, where to look, whether you need to hire someone, whether it's you, and whether or not you're ready for grants. So let's get to it. I'm going to share a presentation, so just give me one moment as I make this happen. So grant writing 101, an introduction to proposal development. So this is where we're at. A quick, oh, hi, this is me, Justin Brezhnev. Friends call me Brezh. I'm a licensed fundraising counsel in multiple states. What does that mean? I advise all kinds of organizations to raise money. You need a specific license to advise 501c3s, and advising includes grant writing. So I run an agency where we do fundraising counsel as a service. I'm a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. That's kind of where I learned the tricks of the trade. And so this is where I get a lot of the textbooks, the worksheets, the stuff that I'll be sharing during this workshop. So also I run a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. We turn 8 years old in October. It's called Hacker Fund. And that is also where we learned a lot of the paperwork processes that are necessary to receive grants and process grants. So hopefully we will demystify some things for you today. Born and raised Los Angeles, child of Jewish immigrants, and also, like I believe one of your executives, Mickey, I'm also Bruin, and so Bruin born, Bruin bred, and so that's who I am. But let's get to the agenda. So this is what we're going to talk about. Why are we here? What is a grant? Am I ready? Where's the money? What makes a good proposal? At the end, we'll have a quick exercise. And then how can I get help? So that's what we're going to get to it. So let's start with why are we here, right? We are here to hopefully create a framework for assessing and writing grant proposals within your organization. Folks, everyone, obviously hit the simple questions that we had in the beginning for what you might need grant funding for. Hopefully, we will demystify what methodologies are accessible to you to be able to produce those proposals. So the outcomes of this, you will learn how to identify grant funding opportunities. And that a lot of times starts with identifying whether you're ready and what in your organization is grant fundable. And then the other outcome is you will learn how to craft competitive application responses. So let's get to it. So what is a grant? A lot of folks, said that a grant is free money. A grant is money you don't have to give back. It is just non-dilutive capital. It is just money that could be used for any purpose whatsoever. And while a lot of those answers are close, they're tiptoeing around something that's very important to consider. So a grant is a contract. You're not just getting money for no reason. You're getting money to produce a specific set of outcomes. And so that contract in which money is exchanged for outcomes is, the contract that you create with that funder. If the funder wants you to go and empower entrepreneurs in Los Angeles, and they give you $100,000, that $100,000 has to go get spent on the program that empowers entrepreneurs, right? And then you send them a report that says, here is how you spent it. They're not paying you for a service. The organization that gives grants is essentially allocating money for you to do the specific program that yields the outcomes. And so this is what happens when you search for private foundation money, or you're looking for public money from a government, or you're bidding on an RFP, which is a request for proposals. A government agency may put out a request for proposals for, an operator of a specific program, like an operator of an accelerator to empower entrepreneurs, and organizations can bid on that. And so what we're going to learn today, the framework for it, is the same framework that you would apply for a foundation, the same framework you would apply for a government agency. So the goal of today is just a primer. So we're not going to get too deep into all the different forms that are necessary, but hopefully we'll point you in the right direction. And later on, we'll give you the templates that hopefully can make you successful. So what types of programs can get funded? So before we go into the next slide, what type of programs can get funded? So almost any type of program that has some kind of tax exempt activity could be grant funded. And what does that mean? The nonprofit sector has tax exempt activity. So if it's charitable, educational, scientific, religious, et cetera, there's a set amount of exempt activities. And if you do those exempt activities and you fall within those categories, you can bid on the specific money that is allocated in those tranches of capital for you to do the activities, right? So if you are an entity, whether you are, if you are an entity that is a 501c3 and you're a nonprofit and you're looking to raise money, or you're a commercial enterprise, but you happen to be doing some kind of socially impactful program activity, or you're helping socially disadvantaged populations, or you're protecting the environment, you're doing certain things that organizations at the public agency level or at the private foundation level are looking to fund. And so there's routes for you to apply for this. And so a lot of the programs, the program expenses, when you applied for this workshop, you had to put in like, what are potential expenses? So the programs are essentially going to be the wrappers around those expenses. And so when you're pitching a specific funder, you are essentially telling them, these are the programs that we are doing, these are the related expenses, and it aligns with the mission of the funding that you have allocated for the outcomes that you want. And we hypothesize that our programs are going to deliver on those outcomes. And so given this framework, most organizations have to develop a logic model, essentially a way of thinking about their organizations. When you're pitching to VCs and you're raising capital and you're selling pieces of your company for venture capital, there's a way of pitching them. Analogously, in the grant world, there's a specific way of pitching funders. And so it goes back to a very specific model, and it's called the theory of change. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully you'll walk away with an idea of how to develop this so that moving forward, you will have this theory of change model, and you can bid on private foundation capital, or you can bid on government sources, whether you're a commercial entity or whether you're a tax exempt entity. So am I ready? Is this opportunity for me? Can everyone see these diagrams? Is it blurry? Do I have to zoom in? Let me know. How are we doing?
Easy.
Nice. I got a thumbs up. Cool. Just making sure. Excellent. So am I ready? Is this opportunity for me? So these are excerpts from a very specific book, which I will share with everyone. It's called Getting Funded. It is a textbook for anyone who is trying to write grant proposals. It's the complete guide to writing grant proposals. And a lot of the excerpts you'll see here are figures from this book. And so, am I ready? Is this opportunity for me? So that's the most important thing to understand about the grant proposal process is, you know, before you apply and start spinning the wheels of the machine, are you ready? Do you have, you know, your programs aligned in such a way? Are you communicating and thinking about your programs in a way that will allow you to get funded? So the theory of change, and before I go into this, if you know what a theory of change is, can somebody throw a thumbs up? Amazing. I have not seen a single person say they know what a theory of change is. That is a beautiful thing. I'm so stoked. So amazing. Yes. So a theory of change. The way that we look at this, a theory of change is your organization's theory on how you implement the change. Very simple. Your theory of how you implement the change that you want to see. If you are successful, if you are given the money based on the theory of the change that you want to see, if you are successful, the outcome will happen. It is very similar to the scientific method, right? You have a problem statement, you see a need, you think about how do I fix a lack of STEM education at the K through 12 level. There is a lack of accessibility for technology education at the K through 12 level. If I'm successful with the model that I'm building, we should be able to solve that problem. And so as you look over here in this specific diagram, you'll see in the purpose of this specific theory of change is to reduce drug involvement and promote positive behavior. That is the outcome. The funders, when they are giving you money, they want you to essentially fulfill the experiment that you are setting out. You are the person, or your team is the group that sets out the experiment. For example, with the organization that I run, Hacker Fund, our experiment was to prove to funders that hackathons were a mechanism that taught students how to program in an engaging project-based learning mentor-led environment that would lead to increased employment among at-risk youth. And so we would get funding and we would pitch organizations like a Microsoft, like a Google, and say, hey, if you give us $10,000 or $20,000, we're going to do a hackathon and we are going to hopefully prove out the model, the hypothesis that we have using your money. We have this experiment model and we want to fund the iterations of this. And so that is what a theory of change needs to be. So you develop this specific model and you work backwards. So every single person who's attending here, this workshop, mentioned that they're trying to empower some group of people. They're serving someone. There's an end user of whatever it is that you're building. So if you are successful, what happens? So what I want to do right now, let's take 1 minute. I'm really curious just to see, take 1 minute and think about what is the purpose of your organization? Based on what you see on this diagram, figure 3.2, how would you phrase the purpose of your organization? So take 1 minute and we'll check back in. I'm putting a timer on just in case.
Justin, do you want people to put their responses in the chat so we can all see them?
Yeah, yes, as soon as I say it. I just don't want everyone to post ahead of each other because it might give people, influence each other's answers. Ten more seconds. Sweet. Alrighty, folks, drop your answers into the chat. Let's see what's good. Let's see where it happened to everyone. Can you folks hear me, see me? Yes, I think you still can. All right, cool. Nice. Eradicate health disparities in South Central. Hell yeah. What else we got? Help energy transition to zero emission fleet. Okay. Take care of needle pain so everyone can take care of their health. Okay, very cool. Why can't I see the chat? Uh-oh, I lost everyone in the chat. Oh, what screen are you on? My apologies, folks. I'm trying to find you really quick. Help people become financially stable by building financial practice into their daily lives. Well, I'm trying to find where the video of you guys are, but you're on some, at this point, you're on some monitor. I don't know where you're at, but hopefully I'll find you eventually. If there's at some point I'm not looking at the camera and you can't see me, just let me know, but it looks like my camera is still on and you can still hear me. Cool. Okay, so at this point, so when you see folks that are dropping in their purpose, right? Help energy transition to zero emission fleet, take care of needle pain so everyone can take care of their health, eradicate health disparities in South Central, right? This is the purpose of your organization. So as you are doing this model and you are building this, you have to take a step back and think, what are the goals? What are the objectives? And what are the activities? While those three words sound like they're similar, they are inherently different. And so your goals are at a high level. What are you going to be doing to achieve the purpose? And then when you start breaking down those goals, you have specific objectives that are actionables. Like if they are the essentially the x to the x plus 1. It is the difference between your starting point and your end point, right? It's your delta. And then when you boil down to achieve that, what are the specific activities to do that? So when you develop this model, this is the model that you would use not only to submit to all the different grantors when you're writing your applications, but also specifically to inform your boards, whether you're a commercial enterprise or a tax exempt entity, nonprofit, 501c3, your volunteers, your staff, anyone who is involved with your organization, they should know what your why is, what your purpose is, so that everyone is aligned. And this theory of change is a model that is going to be used for you to communicate the purpose of why your programs exist and why you're asking for funding and why you want to develop these outcomes. And so when you look to the right over here, you have a checklist for gathering information about potential funders. So this is a piece of the checklist. Obviously, it's an excerpt, but what you can see is, you have to find out a lot about whether you are ready for this kind of a process, right? What types of grants are the organizations giving out that align with your programs? Because the biggest problem with grant funding is folks try to bend over backwards to be able to apply for the grant. They start committing to programs that are outside of the purview of what they had the capacity to even do. And then all of a sudden, you're committing to things that you're on the hook for. And what's even scarier is when it's government grants, they will take whatever you agreed to and put it on a work order and a scope of work, and you won't be able to get the next set of funding until you achieve whatever you agreed to. And so it's really important to do the assessment and understand that if you're ready for it at first. So where's the money at? This is probably the question that you're wondering. Where do I get the money? And so there's two sources, public and private. Public sources, you have the federal government and the state government, local government. So that's if you're applying, if you're an arts organization, maybe you're applying for the National Endowment of the Arts. If you are maybe applying to the Mayor's Fund in Los Angeles and you're looking to get a grant from them, maybe you're applying to some state programs that are statewide education programs. And then those are public funds. Those are funds that are coming specifically from public sources, which means it's a lot of times taxpayer money. It's money that comes and gets allocated into budgets that you can bid on. A lot of times these are this is money that could be allocated through different boards, like a city council will vote on different projects, and a lot of the processes that you see done in the city that have companies that contract to do those processes, a lot of times they bid on these public sources of capital via an RFP, and essentially they require the same framework. It's the theory of change, and you work backwards to justify what your methodology experiment for how you're going to implement it. That is what you send in your application to the RFP. So the way that they mostly differ, there's also timelines, what they want to be reported, how they like to be acknowledged, how much money do they award. And as I said, with public funds, there is less wiggle room in terms of coming back and saying, hey, we want to make adjustments to how we're going to spend the funds. With private foundations and the organizations that are listed on the right side over here, there is a lot more wiggle room for you to come back and say, hey, we want to use the funds a little bit differently. For example, when COVID hit with Hacker Fund, we raised money to buy a CNC machine. And when COVID hit, we had this money allocated. We were about to buy a CNC machine, but now we can't be indoors. And so we said, listen, we turned back to the folks that gave us the money and we said, listen, we want to achieve the same amount of outcomes, but we believe in a different hypothesis of what could be incorporated to use the money along the same theory of change that we've developed. The same outcomes will be delivered. We were just going to use a different mechanism of that. Instead of buying a CNC machine, we'll use that same $10,000 to develop a different process. A lot of times those private foundations or the corporations that gave you that kind of contributed capital, the non-dilutive capital, they'll work with you, which is really awesome. So where do I find this money, right? So a lot of times this money, you'll find them in different databases. You'll find them in databases like opengrants.io or Foundation Center. There's tons of them. What all of those databases do is essentially the same thing. They are aggregating information that's from public data, that is the IRS website, the 990s, the public foundations. They aggregate that data so that you can see what organizations are funding, what their cycles are. And honestly, the fact of the matter is that what you as somebody who's a grant seeker need to be doing is building relationships. And so while it is a numbers game, fundraising is, you have to spread far and wide and find the organizations that hopefully can fund you and align with your mission. But it is a relationship game. And when folks think that it's going to, be a couple of emails that they send and all of a sudden $10,000 or $50,000 comes in, it's not like that. It is oftentimes a relationship building game. And the most important thing is to have whoever is assigned to this process do proper prospecting. And in that, you find the different contacts from the different foundations or the different state agencies or federal agencies. You find out the deadlines. You find out who's managing those grants, who are the decision makers, and you give them a call. There is nothing that grantors dislike more than folks reaching out to them with just so cold. It is very similar to how, imagine you have allocated capital and you're thinking, how do I allocate this money? A government is a federal agency or a state agency that's taxpayer money. So they want to know that you know what you're doing. So a lot of times the public funds will be a lot more complex. Applications will have more reporting requirements. They'll favor proposals from established organizations or folks that have scientific research that backs their assumptions, proven out models. And so when you look at the other side of the coin, the private foundations, while the grant sizes might be a little bit smaller, you have more flexibility. So when you look for these, obviously, if you find a grant writer or a grant professional, they will know where to look. A lot of times they will subscribe to the various databases to be able to find the right opportunities for you so that you can make the assessment. A grant professional isn't going to know essentially what you need. It is your job to work with the grant professional to find out what it is that is the perfect fit for your organization. So a lot of times it is important for the founders or whoever is running the day-to-day to be really involved in this fundraising process. So at this point, we're halfway through. We're going to get into some workshopping right now. That's a little more hands-on. So I want to know if there's any questions right now. Feel free to ask right now.
I have a question, Justin.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Kelly from Hanks Meat Market. Hi, everyone. So we're a business. I was just interested in listening to the information about grants, but could you speak a little about as a business owner that doesn't have a nonprofit entity, like maybe what the process might look like for funding from grants to us? Like, are there processes where I would link up with another nonprofit, or Like, could you
Sure.
explain some of that a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. That's a very great question. So also let me know if you can see me, because I can't see y'all. Something happened to my monitors, just making sure that that you can see me and hear me.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, cool.
Hear
Just making
you.
sure. Cool. Just making sure. So if you're a commercial entity, you're a business, there are grants out there for you. If you go to like grants.gov, et cetera, like any of the federal agencies, they will specifically tell you what kinds of organizations they will fund. So a lot of times it'll say 501c3 or an organization that has a fiscal sponsor or a commercial entity, or it doesn't even matter, right? They'll specify that. So the process that I just described, everything that I just described is applicable to a commercial entity. They're going to ask you for the exact same thing. And if you decide to go a route that a lot of folks recently started going through, because Hacker Fund does this service, is finding a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor is a 501c3 through which you can raise funds if the project that you are doing is matching the nonprofit's mission. Hacker Fund's mission is to empower technologists to create social change. So a lot of folks that are bidding on grants are helping the disadvantaged, educating the community, protecting the environment, and they use Hacker Fund. Even if they're a commercial entity, they're using the Hacker Fund to bid on grants to win money that is used for a tax-exempt purpose. The funds are not commingled, right? They're separated, and the funds are used to underwrite these specific projects. So if you're a commercial entity and you're trying to do a project, like say, for example, whatever it is that you're doing, you may have whatever it is that your business is, but you decide to want to go save the manatees. Why incorporate a separate nonprofit? There's so much paperwork, so much money. You can still bid on a grant by signing a contract with what's called a fiscal sponsor. So there is a route for you. It's a little bit more nuanced if you decide to go that one. If you decide to bid on sources that only fund 501c3s, like for example, there's certain private foundations that are incorporated as nonprofits. They can only give money to a 501c3. So fiscal sponsors exist as the connective tissue. Federal agencies and state agencies and certain grants that are specifically public sources, you'll notice that they also fund enterprises that are commercial entities.
Thank you.
Sweet. Any other questions at this point?
Hi, this is Olympia from Supermarket. I wanted to ask if you have ever secured federal funding.
Federal funding, I have definitely secured federal funding via all kinds of applications. They are very large, heavy on restrictions, bidding on them, reporting on them. What's really fun is finding out who is bidding on different federal opportunities and working with them. What's really powerful that federal governments want to see is coalitions of organizations that work together, that have aligned theory of changes and apply. And something very similar, let's just say government funding, Grid 110 and Hacker Fund at one point applied and responded to an RFP that actually came down, if I'm not mistaken, from state funding, right? And the process is very similar to what we just described. There's a lot of understanding of what your programs are, what the outcomes are, what your theory of change is. And so the process for that, a lot of times the RFPs will be posted if it's like a federal opportunity or state or whatever municipal body, and they'll have webinars and they'll have sessions where other organizations come in. And there'll be sessions like this where folks are asking questions, and you'll see all the organizations that are bidding. And oftentimes it's wise to reach out to those folks and say, hey, what if we collaborated? Because it shows to the grantor that you're willing to use the funds in an efficient manner. And it strips the ego away around wanting to own the result. It's actually, it communicates to the funders that you're very much focused on the outcomes, which is change that you want to create. Hopefully
Thank you.
that
That was really helpful. Thanks so much.
absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions? Definitely time for one more question. Cool. All right, see none. There will be time for more questions at the end. So if at any point you feel like you still have something unanswered and you want to ask at the end, feel free. Cool. So let's get to it. So what makes a good proposal? Once you find the grants, right? There's so many databases. I have thousands of tabs every single day of just different grants that pop up. Some databases will have outdated information. So important, call the corporation, call the foundation, whoever is doing the contributed capital. This is at a high level what you will see in proposals. Normally, the process of relationship building to secure a grant, you will normally reach out, call first, always call, and then afterwards inquire about the process, what they need. Maybe they need a letter of intent at first, which is a 3-page summary of these. And then they say, okay, you sound kind of awesome. Maybe you should apply. And those are oftentimes unsolicited proposals. So those are foundations that don't necessarily have an RFP. They're not putting it out and saying, hey, we want to solve this problem. We have a request for proposals. Please send this. Very similar to Y Combinator's request for startups. Request for startups, request for proposals. Your proposal and your project, that's a piece of whatever it is that your startup is doing or your business is doing. A project within your business that fits within the theory of change is what these funders are funding. So in that component, in those components of that LOI, once they say, hey, you're pretty awesome, they're going to say, okay, we'll submit a proposal. And then the proposal will have these: cover letter, executive summary, your need statement, your project description, an organization background, evaluation, your specific qualifications for why you are the organization or your group of organizations are the right folks to tackle this plan. And that goes back to the question of, how if you're bidding on a government proposal, oftentimes they look at the qualifications of the team very, very thoroughly. Because they want to know that if we bestow upon you $100,000 of taxpayer money, will you come back with results, right? Do you have the evaluation plan to tell us whether or not you're even successful? So think about your business as you're like the scientific method. You're a scientist and you're saying, if this program is successful, we'll have these outcomes. How do we measure it? This is our evaluation plan. We do it by maybe measuring surveys or measuring admission or measuring XYZ, whatever it is that you measure, right? Whatever is measured gets managed, and whatever is managed is fundable. And that is very important for a grant funder. Then you have your sustainability plan. This is something that a lot of folks overlook because they think that, oh, I got contributed capital, some non-dilutive capital, it'll always be there. We saw with COVID, funds can dry up, right? And what's really important is when you are bidding on contributed capital, non-dilutive capital, the funders want to know that you have a plan that if their funding is the last of the funding, you have a mechanism to ensure that your program, whatever it is within your theory of change, continues working. You have some way of sustaining it. And that could be maybe alternative sources of revenue. Maybe that is turning revenue out of something that you produce using the grant. Maybe that is a partner that is working with you to ensure the sustainability. A lot of times it varies. And so if you look at the components for government funders, there's the same components, but they will have a larger emphasis on the sustainability plan. As you can see, it puts it higher up because they look at the sustainability plan as a way to ensure that whatever they are funding is something that they can continue funding, but over time, they don't have to allocate as much tax dollars to get you started. Or if they feel, oh, wait a minute, you're doing really well, maybe we can allocate more money, but in a very efficient way because you have a sustainability plan that makes sense. So it's really important, no matter what kind of entity you are, to really focus on this. For folks that are commercial enterprises and, are figuring out ways to make money, this is where it comes in. For folks that are nonprofits, there's such thing as program service revenue, fee for service. Figure out ways to slot that into your sustainability plan. So this is what we are going to work on for the last 15 minutes of this workshop. So when you're looking at a grant proposal, there's major questions to ask yourself. This is where the introspection comes in. So what we're going to do right now is, as I'm walking through this, I want you to start asking yourselves these questions, and in front of you, write this down either with a pen or write this down on the computer, because I want you to walk through this, because we're going to add, at the end is going to be an exercise where I'm going to be a funder and you're going to articulate answers like this. So important part here, a need. Why are you doing this? That's the most important thing. So what I want right now, let's take 1 minute. Everyone write down what they're like, why are they doing this? And when I say, when the minute is up, please post it into the chat. And then we'll work with everyone to continue on this little table. So go ahead. 1 minute. There we go. Cool. We're almost there. All righty, folks, time's up. Please throw it into the chat. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing the project that you are seeking funding for? It doesn't have to be too long of an answer. Something very, very short and sweet is great. Feel free to throw it into the chat. Nice, because a lack of fresh food is causing increased death in my neighborhood. Amazing. Anybody else have one? For sake of time, please post in one more so that we can work with it. Okay, we're just going to continue with this one. So why do this? We are doing this because there's a lack of fresh food and it's causing increased death in my neighborhood. So that is the underlying question. Funders are going to think, okay, there is clearly a need in this area. How will they measure it? What will they do? How will they do it? And then why them? And then the last and final question, how much does it cost? Right? So those are like, as soon as you understand why you are doing this, you then can work backwards from your theory of change, and you can put together the specific budget that will be for the program of the project within your business or within your organization that you're looking to get funding for. Grant funding could be divided into a variety of different kinds of funding. So you'll have things like capacity building funding, program related funding, general operating funding. Capacity building is something like to increase the capacity of your ability to do something, like if you're investing in software to be able to digitize certain activities. That's you would apply for folks that are giving out capacity building grants. Say you want to go and save the manatees and you have to go and buy equipment. That would be a program grant. Or it could even be if you're buying something that, if it's like a building, that could be, a capital grant. And then everyone's favorite funding is the operating support, the general operating support. That doesn't necessarily have any restrictions. It is used for whatever is needed to operate your program specifically in that project. So as you're developing, your grant proposals, obviously, after this workshop, you will have the tools to be able to go deeper into what a proposal would look like, because it's a lot of attachments. At a high level, these are the different components. So what's really interesting is if you take, this specific need that was suggested, because a lack of fresh food is causing increased death in my neighborhood. What you would do to answer the second question that is being offered here, which is suggestions on how to find a partner with research orgs to measure program impact. What's really interesting is there will be a lot of times in the sessions that you will attend when you're bidding on different funding, you will find these organizations to partner with, because they're also looking to solve the same problem. So a lot of times, grant funding is awarded to folks who have the same, who are trying to solve the same trying to solve the same underlying question, and they are doing aligned projects. So here's a little exercise. We have 9 minutes left. What we're going to get into is what I want everyone to do here before we get into questions that are a little bit more pointed. I want everyone to walk away here doing an exercise in grant writing specifically, so that you can write it into the chat, and then hopefully I can guide some folks into the right way to communicate the need, the project description, or the evaluation. So here's the RFP. The Brezhnev Foundation funds programs that empower socially disadvantaged individuals to pursue careers in entrepreneurship. Grants are $25,000 each and are classified as programs, capacity building, or general operating support. I'm asking you right now to write me 3 sentences. Communicate the need, what's the project description, and how will you evaluate? It goes back to your theory of change that we did earlier. And so let's take the next 5 minutes to go through this and put together these 3 sentences. And so use whatever it is use whatever it is that you submitted to this workshop with. So folks submitted with a specific company or what their activities that they want to fund or whatever it is, the outcomes that they want. Use that org if you can and write me these 3 sentences. If you do feel like it doesn't fit, that's okay too. That's important. Let me know. So take 5 minutes. And at this point, just for the sake of this, I will be calling on people randomly just so that we hold each other accountable to the actual activity. Three sentences: a need, project description, evaluation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this up so you can see examples of the sentences. So it's need, project description, evaluation. Right here, right here, right here. So once more, the Brezhnev Foundation funds programs that empower socially disadvantaged individuals to pursue careers in entrepreneurship. Grants are $25,000 each and are classified as programs, capacity building, or general operating support. Give me the 3 sentences, and they should look like one of these. Is anyone stuck? Does anyone need help? Feel free to DM me in this workshop. I'm happy to provide some support. Still have 3 minutes. And just to remind everyone, the purpose of this exercise is to get you to specifically learn how to communicate about your grant fundable project. When you are grant seeking, there's a specific way to communicate. Yes, when we're time's up, I will say to paste into the chat, but not yet. I want to make sure that everyone has enough time to work on their own before they see other folks' answers. This is for your specific business. Yes, this is for your specific business. We had someone ask a question. Is this an example for our specific business or a program, or just an example? This is for your specific business to apply to the Brezhnev Foundation, and it's up to you to evaluate whether or not this is applicable as a grant to you. If it is, hit me with 3 sentences. If it's not, tell me why. Hopefully that answered the question. If you're a commercial entity and you are wondering if this fits, assume you acquired a fiscal sponsor through which you can receive this money. So we are a foundation that can only give to 501c3s, but even if you're a commercial entity that wants to use tax exempt funds to do your program, you can bid through us. So if you're wondering whether or not you fit based on the mechanisms of commercial versus tax exempt, you still fit. The goal is for you to assess whether or not programmatically you fit. So 10 more seconds. All right, time's up, folks. Let's do it. So post it into the chat. Go ahead. Nice, there we go. Love it. There we go. I'm just going to read off the first one, the first 3 sentences. South Central has X small businesses generating an average of X amount of dollars. This is less than X% of the state small business average, and these businesses receive less than X% of all funding. Nice. Great need statement. We are launching an incubator program to give founders the support they need to stay in business, grow, and create jobs. We will evaluate our success by measuring an X increase in sales across participants and by finding that 80% of participants describe themselves as more capable than before. So when I look at this, there is a very clear need. I, as the funder, am like, okay, I totally understand why it is that you're doing it. I understand very clear model. It's an incubator program signified by the word program. But then when I get to the third sentence, we will evaluate our success by measuring an X increase in sales across participants and by finding 80% of participants describe themselves as more capable than before. You just described to me the outcomes that you want to achieve. You described to me the ideal measurable impact. But how do you achieve that specifically? How are you going, what methodologies are you going to be implementing to figure this out? And some of those could be maybe we will evaluate our success by measuring an increase in sales across participants and by finding 80% of participants describe themselves as more capable than before, right? The first part, measuring sales, very clear. But when you're describing by finding that 80% of participants describe themselves as more capable than before, is that through surveys? Is that some kind of a post engagement methodology? What is the mechanism? In that third sentence, your language needs to specifically outline how you are measuring. And hopefully that made sense.
Thank you so much. I have to get on another call, but I'll definitely look forward to reaching out to you. And I really appreciate all your help. This has been really great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Here's a slide for how you can get help. You can either hire a fundraising counsel, join a community of fundraising professionals like the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and also Hacker Fund has an accelerator program for grant seekers. So even if you're a for-profit or nonprofit, whatever it is, if you match our mission, which is empowering technologists to create social change, we have an accelerator program for you to help you get grant funding ready. More information to come. So hopefully you got something out of this. But for everyone else, I'm here for another 5 minutes if you're willing. I can happy to answer any questions.